another episode of the Odyssey Podcast. My name is Jeremy Mullally, I'm the host, and I'm here with a special guest today in Peter Lynch, and he is called himself the Unshakable coach, if I'm not mistaken, and I want to welcome Peter to the show. So Peter, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah,
Looking forward to it.
Me too. Me too. It's exciting. And can you tell us where you're calling in from? Because I don't speak to too many international guests, so this is sort of a first time for me. But whereabouts you calling in
Good
from,
stuff.
Peter?
Yeah, so I'm from Colorado Springs here in Colorado, of course, right in the middle, more or less central. Well, yeah, a little bit of western central USA, and Colorado Springs is pretty much right in the middle of the state. So beautiful scenery, hot day, but just snowed last week. So we're definitely in our wild springtime.
Okay,
You never
yeah.
know what it's going to do.
Fair enough. And for those who are listening, I suppose, who may not have heard of you, could you just tell us, just briefly, a bit about yourself, Peter, and I guess kind of what you're doing right now as far as your coaching?
Oh, absolutely. I've been on this coaching journey myself for about 2 years. It was really since starting my own business, but I mean, I could say things are much deeper than that, as we'll get into, I'm sure, with this. It's a culmination of my life experience thus far, really led me to a place of wanting to be a coach, wanting to, because I've always had a passion for seeing others succeed. Starting my own business, it made natural sense to help entrepreneurs succeed. I love helping entrepreneurs because I believe that entrepreneurs are the key to solving problems that we face in our world creatively, because an entrepreneur is a creative, right? We're creating new opportunity. We're creating new solutions to the problems that we all face. So I love seeing, the opportunity to empower entrepreneurs. And I really dove in headfirst with it more on the strategic, the marketing and the sales side of things. But as things continue to develop for me, the real work is about helping the entrepreneur align with who they are, so that they can succeed as their true selves. Because when you're aligned, when you're being your authentic self, that speaks louder than anything. It amplifies all the efforts of everything. It eliminates the whole imposter syndrome, self-sabotage kind of process, and that we can find ourselves battling ourselves, right? So that's a short, I suppose, of just the work that I do, is really helping the entrepreneur be themselves, and then put into place those strategic pieces of, here's marketing and sales, that aligns with who you are.
Yeah, I kind of want to touch on that alignment angle, because just recently, like the other week, I was had the opportunity to speak to like a small group of students who had an interest in entrepreneurship and business. That there's a particular program that they're a part of, and a question that was asked of me was, I suppose, how do you like select what it is you're going to do? Like, I guess, like, what your business is going to be. And the answer I gave was just drawing from my own experiences was, aligning it with something you're actually passionate about. Is that kind of what you're talking about is that a part of what you mean when you talk about alignment?
Absolutely. And I loved you just said the word passionate, because I think that's a big thing in entrepreneurship, right? It's like we're passionate about what we do generally, because money alone isn't enough of a motivator. But the word passion means willing to suffer. So when you're passionate so when you really discover what you're passionate about, you're discovering what you're willing to suffer for, and that's what then you're aligned. Because if you're willing to suffer for it, that's your life calling, and that's where you'll find fulfillment, not just a payday.
Yeah, and I guess, is that where I suppose that, like, intrinsic motivation comes from, rather than other, like, external factors. Like, do you see that kind of distinction there?
No, absolutely. I look at it as one of the best ways I heard it put was push versus pull motivation. Push motivation is when you feel a spiritual back, you got to do something or else. Pull motivation, Steve Jobs talks about this, having a vision that's so great that it pulls you towards it, that you feel magnetically drawn towards it. And I think that kind of pull motivation is something that comes from deep within. And again, that comes to me, that's the dream. That's your calling. That's your sense of purpose that calls to you. And that calls you to be who you are meant to be, to achieve that purpose and calling, which is already who you are equipped to be. So that's the beauty. The deeper layers of alignment is you're uncovering who you are, rather than trying to be something. Because if you're trying to be something, you're not being you. And if you're not being you, you're robbing the gift of the world of the gift that is you, because you're already equipped with everything you need to give your gift. Because a gift is meant to be given too, right?
Yeah, right. So, and you're speaking my language here, Peter. But I mean, just while we're on that subject, I'd love to hear about what's your vision, could you share a bit about that and how that's kind of been formed over the years?
Oh man, yeah. Um, my vision is really that, again, touches back to just that I see that entrepreneurs are the ones who have that opportunity to create, to really make an impact in their community and in the world collectively. So like whether we're speaking about making a real impact in a third world country, as in breaking the aid model and uplifting a community from within, or we're talking about, even here in the States, we've got so many places that are just so many areas of our country, this first world country, and the top of the biggest power in the planet and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, like we have so many countries, so many cities that are just full of ghettos where there's just oppressed communities, that deserve to be lifted up from within rather than being given a handout. So that's the thing for me. Is it's like, I detest the model where people are, but it's, yeah, deeper than that. I detest that we as human beings have been raised and conditioned to feel that we're not good enough, that we have to live into some kind of, live up to some kind of standard or expectation to be good enough. And that plagues entrepreneurs too, because, there's I just had this experience the other day. I had lunch at the country club with somebody. I actually hated it. Can't stand the country club. It's too stiffy and stuffy for me. And the guy who was on lunch with was like, "Oh, you're not very polished, are you?" Like, no, I guess I'm not.
What does that mean?
I know. It's like, what does that mean? I think what it means is I'm not playing a game. I'm not putting on a face.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I can't. If I was doing that, I would be dying inside. And I've tried to do that. So that's like the deep place for me, my vision. And it ties back to my own story of like struggling with my own dark times in my life and struggling deeply with depression and my own mental health, et cetera. It's like, I want to see people feel confident being themselves. And even the word, again, though, I'm sure you'll catch on very quickly. I love the etymology and the meanings of words, but confidence, confide, the Latin root, means, it really means understanding. So when we talk about self-confidence, it doesn't mean that I put on a mask of bravado, and act like I'm the biggest and the best. That's not confidence. That's insecurity wearing a mask, a mask of confidence. Confidence doesn't wear a mask, because self-confidence is to know yourself. So the more I know myself, the more I know that I'm terrible at taxes and I need to outsource that, for instance, right? So there's a level of almost humility that comes with confidence, because it just means I'm very self-aware. This situation is not one I do well in. This one is. Here's my strengths. Here's my weaknesses. Then I have confidence because I can lean into where I'm good and stay away from places where I'm not so good. And I'm not going to get sucked into trying to prove something.
So like you're saying like kind of requires a certain level of like self-honesty, like realization, but also being honest with yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Acknowledging where you're at so that you can grow into your true potential rather than trying to force yourself to be something that you're not, which I think is the thing that plagues a lot. Again, there's some people that are better implementers. There's others that are visionaries. And if you're trying to be Albert Einstein's quote, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll spend its life feeling like it's stupid. Yet we do that to ourselves very often. I should be able to do this and I should be able to do that. Why?
Yeah, it's like a continuing human problem, I think. But there's something I want to ask you, Peter, because it was one of the main reasons I want to get you on the show. Because like when I was sort of learning a bit about your work, and you kind of touched on here about being authentic and being genuine, and I saw that especially when you were talking about it in the context of sales. I kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit because like if you would ask anyone, and I know these are at least the associations I have with it, like when you say just salesman, it's like pushy, obnoxious, like in your face, kind of loud and whatnot. But you've talked about a very different approach as far as how you're being an authentic person when you're in that sales role. Let's have a chat about that because how did you arrive at that, and how do you see that working in the current business and entrepreneurial environment?
Yeah, no, I love it. I love talking sales. It's such a it's a huge dimension of my work,
Yes.
and it's definitely a dimension of my vision is to impact that whole industry. Because I mean, let's just start with, on this side, like after what the world's been through, the way the consumer is buying has changed dramatically. So the conventional methods, here's and the major problem with conventional sales is it's just with this simplistic mentality of, if it works, keep doing it. But nobody's observing what are the repercussions of it. It's like, I was trying to think of, using a wrench as a hammer. It works, but it's not what it's meant for. And it doesn't work efficiently, and it doesn't work as well as it could, right? And that's the thing about efficiency and even opportunity, is you don't know your own blind spots. And the sales industry is outdated. I mean, look at the technology we're using to do this. Technology advances at a dizzying pace, but sales technology is still outdated. It's still running on this mentality, and the underlying piece of it is it's running on a mentality which is conflict. That it's one person against another, and that's what a sale is. And
and that's kind of like, I guess, where the conversation comes in, because a lot of the time that's like the rhetoric around it is like there's almost associations made to like almost like military, like how strange is that? But sorry, I cut you off. If you could keep going, I love what you're saying.
But no, you're spot on. It's like winning and losing. Yeah, like it's a combat. You're going into combat. And a lot of the big name sales motivators and trainers, that's the thing. You got to keep yourself motivated and, really work yourself up. I'm going in to close this big deal. I'm the big bad. And I just like, and that was a huge part of my journey, trying to grow my business, whether, starting as a service business and then moving into coaching. I'm like, well, how do I sell coaching, going from service-based business, into coaching, and just struggling with that, and having to learn this from the ground up, and being somebody who, also like sales was a struggle to me, to the point of having panic attacks about the idea of it, because there was conflict involved. And there's a lot of other layers to that, from my journey of just like the idea of conflict, especially with a male figure, would bring me deep panic and anxiety. So I'm just like trying to figure this out kind of from a very different perspective. And that's what helped me to see that the conflict was part of the problem. What if we remove the conflict? Because it's simple, as simple as, if I come and, you're not here physically, but if I came and pushed on you, what would be your natural reaction?
Oh, you probably push back. Yeah.
I would expect so, right? I go push, you're going to push back. And then it's escalation.
Yeah.
Right. Because then I have to push harder. And that's where all the motivation and the closing and objection handling, overcoming objections, is me trying to get over your shield.
Yeah, and then like you said, the combative like sort of metaphor comes in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's honestly, it's just downright offensive, because it's disrespectful to the other human being, which is the cornerstone of everything for me. That the human being deserves to feel valued, and to value ourselves for who we are. And so when we have sales tactics that are devaluing the other human being, I believe that is not just inefficient, right? It's not just that it's outdated. I think a lot of times it's immoral and unethical, because it's focused on how do we get money out of this person. For me, sales is about the facilitation of a new decision. Right. And so then at that point, it's the same thing as coaching, because as a coach, again, another Latin word that I love, the root of the word education is educo. In Latin means to educe from within. That means, if from me as a coach and as a salesman, which I know is such a dirty word, right? And immediately people's defenses go up. But for me, sales, I love my sales calls, because it's an opportunity to have a really powerful and deep conversation, where if you and I were having that conversation, we'd be digging deep into what is it that you're really looking for in your business and in your life? What are the obstacles that you're genuinely facing? What have you tried? How are those affecting you? What do you want? And then let's look at, first of all, is that something that I can help you with? If it's not, then I can't go further with you, right? Secondly, let me then educate you on how, if it is something that I could help you in, it would be like, well, let's educate you on how I helped you get there. And then it's really just, do you want to do this? Because for me, that was a big breakthrough aha moment was when I sold my coaching and then had the coaching calls. It was sales all over, working with, behavior, right? Because it's not just, okay, here's the system and the strategy to improve your business, but did you do it? Do you want to do it? How do you facilitate somebody else wanting to do it? Because it comes back to the whole idea of motivation, inner and external motivation. External motivation means then they have push motivation because I'm there saying, better do this thing. Then they need me around. I'm not a very good coach if you need me,
Yeah.
I'm not empowering the person. So it's really about helping them recognize, no, this is what I want. Here's my motivation, why I'm going to do it. So the same thing in the sales call is like, is this something you want? It's facilitation of a new decision. It just happens to be that the sales call, the decision is a financial transaction. If it's a coaching call, the decision is an action transaction. It's all a transaction. There's always a transaction going on. Sometimes money gets involved, and that's where things get a little wiggy because we all have a weird association with money, and then people can approach it very poorly.
Yeah, right. And Peter, like, do you still see there playing like persuasion playing a role there? Like, is there some level of persuasion, or do you look at it in a different way in that context?
It's interesting, right? Because persuasion and manipulation, I think those two things can become very murky, the line in between them, and even manipulation is an interesting word because ultimately manipulation is just to alter something. So it really comes down to what's the intent behind it. And I think that's the deep thing. What's the intent behind it? If the intent behind it is to genuinely help facilitate somebody's decision for their best interest, then here's what happens then in sales conversations for me. If I can see that I'm talking to an ideal candidate, that they're struggling with exactly what I know that I can help them resolve and clear up and move beyond within the first few weeks of working together, if not on the first call, then I feel that I'm doing a disservice by not communicating to them the opportunity, persuading, right? But if I was coming from a place of, I just need the money right now, it would be wrong, right? But where I'm coming from is to use them, not to uplift them. So it's a leadership question. Leadership is not getting to the top. Leadership is, are you willing to go to the bottom and lift others up? Sales is leadership. Sales is influence. Influence is power. Power is easily abused. So it's a terrifying subject in that way because persuasion, influence, power, the power to influence somebody. But that's where also I come back. So I also have a check. Honestly, just like my own practice is to have a check system in my own sales process, which is I allow other people to ask me for the sale. I don't ask them. Right. So that's how I finish my close. I don't like the word close either, because for me, it's opening a relationship. I'm not closing a deal, but I ask, what would you like to do? I don't say, buy this thing. I don't assume the sale. I say, where would you like to go from here?
Yeah. And again,
my program is this.
Yeah. Sorry. I guess that goes back to, like you mentioned before, it's that facilitation of the decision.
The program is this, the investment is this. What would you like to do? Is this something you want? Because if they don't want it, they could buy it because I'm a pushy, obnoxious salesperson. If I went that route, people will make a decision just to get the salesperson off their back. That's a lot of, right? Back to what you said at first, like we have this bad connotation with sales, like get them away from me. I'll buy just to shut them up. Please get them away, right? But then the person's never going to act on it. They're never going to reap the benefits. And that's the biggest thing for me as a coach. Like the last thing I want is to work with somebody, sign somebody on who's not actually going to work with me,
Yeah, and I guess that's similar to, other people who, especially smaller businesses who that like they're the salesman and the let's call it the operator as well. So they're not only like you said, I guess where that's probably where the closing word comes from, because it's like closing, I'm done with this person. Whereas, in your case, it's like, no, like why would you want to, you know, sell someone something that you're going to have to work with them and it's going to be a terrible experience for both of you. So
Right. You're just
yeah.
asking for bitterness and resentment in the relationship. You know, that's another thing. You really set the tone of your client relationship in the sales process. So if and you'll reap what you sow in the sales process, you'll reap that in the client relationship. So if you want more referrals, if you want better testimonials, have a better sales process.
That's a big piece of advice there. But I wanted to ask you, Peter, because I suppose you have experienced the darker side of persuasion from when you were younger. Like, could we just touch on that a little bit? And I guess I want to ask you, how that's informed where you are today, and I guess your perspective on sales, and let's call it persuasion, but like on that what you dubbed the facilitation of decision making.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really just observing that. How do you put it? I suppose just toxic manipulation of people
Mm.
that is bigger than just sales. As in like it's anywhere, because that's again why I'm saying sales is leadership. Because when
Yep.
you take it to that level, you realize that what we're talking, or I suppose down to that deeper level, you realize it goes across um, it goes across disciplines, right? It's not just a sales issue, it's a leadership issue. At that point, it's anywhere that you found leadership, wherever somebody has influence and power, there's this strong potential for abuse that people are going to be used for the benefit of the person, the
Mm.
leader, and that, right, of a toxic leader. And and so honestly, that goes right down to the family dynamic. And this is a challenge for fathers. I speak as a father now, and I speak as someone who had a very, very unhealthy dynamic with my dad. Is that those who have the role of father oftentimes are not a true father, because a father is one who lifts others up. A good father is going to see his children do better than him. An unhealthy father is going to see that, it's the narcissism thing. It's just like, I want to get something out of you. That's unhealthy leadership. That's unhealthy fatherhood. That's unhealthy sales. It's just an unhealthy way to approach other people, because a good sale is a win-win. Like the sales that happen with me, it's like we're all winning. I get to share my gift. I get paid for that. They receive incredible value and they see an ROI, right? It's a win-win. But an unhealthy one is, how am I going to use something? And I've seen this in coaching. I've observed this in some coaches that I've hired and fired, is because
Mm.
they were insecure. And so they had to play a game where they want to coach because they want to feel bigger about themselves. And that means they have to talk down and keep other people down. And honestly, it's a big theme in the coaching world. Some of the big names have actually said this, that if you want to be a coach, it's simple. Find somebody who's a few pages behind you, to use that analogy, right? If you're reading a book, if you're a couple of pages ahead, you can coach them. That embed at the root of that is an assumption that you're ahead of them. As a coach, I don't believe I'm ahead of anybody. I just have a unique gifting of unlocking the potential in others, because again, it comes back to educo, to educe from within. So all that back to what I was saying with fatherhood and this abuse and manipulation. It's being used by somebody else. So experiencing that personally, being used, which is to be manipulated, which is, it's not okay for me to be me. Because if I'm being me, and if I'm being the best version of myself, then I'm not serving a small-minded and insecure agenda. And so I experienced that in my dynamic with my dad growing up, and I saw that happen in religious dynamics in churches, and and I'm a man of faith now, but it's been something that I've definitely struggled through growing up in church throughout my life and witnessing this dark side of human nature, which is just the abuse of other people. Just comes down to, if you're trying to get something out of somebody else, it's unhealthy. But if we're sharing, that's the beauty of, again, sales is an exchange of value. And when the value is exchanged, both sides go up. That's a good exchange. But there's this other, so there's that unhealthy aspect is one person is losing. So it comes
so
right
when
back
there's
to
an imbalance, in that value exchange.
Mm-hmm. And yeah. I mean, so that's a little bit. Any of that you'd like to dig into more? Sorry, I just kind of
No, that's fine.
spot in my thought process.
Totally fine. Like I kind of wanted to explore, I guess, because like reflecting on, well, actually, you haven't even shared really, like, as how long is this, if you want to call it, vocation or career of yours? How long have you been in that coaching space for?
Yeah, just over 2 years now.
Okay.
I started right at the end of 2019, officially. Right, it was that thing I wanted to move into for a good year and a half before that, and yeah, it was a formative kind of season beforehand of just going through my own self-doubt and insecurity, right? Of taking that further leap, and putting myself out there as a coach.
Yeah, so like, but it's something, obviously 2 years ago is when you began, but it's something that you've been thinking about for a longer time than that. And what was the turning point for you then, Peter? Like, what was that moment where you were like, yeah, I can make this leap and roll ahead with it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't. It's a funny thing. I don't have like a sharp moment for that.
Okay.
It just was this building momentum within me of just like, I can do this. Looking around and seeing that despite my own self-doubt, I could look around and see that I could do a better job than mostly. I just saw that there's something like that, I could help others do more, achieve more than they were accomplishing on their own. And so I just knew within me, it's like, that's what I'm meant to be doing then. I do better helping others succeed than even that I do helping myself succeed, if that makes sense. It's just the funny dichotomy of being a coach sometimes too. Like I'm much better at helping others than I am with my own business. Honestly, my clients do better than I do, which I'm proud of and sometimes a little insecure about. So.
And does that mean that, like, I guess, do you see the value of, having a coach in your corner then? Like, do you, like is that some advice you'd give to other people?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Don't.
I mean, obviously there's a certain bias here, but yeah, sure. And over that, over this 2 years, and we can actually sort of broaden it, since you had been, like I said, that momentum had been building for a while. What's been, I guess, your biggest challenge there, Peter? Like, as far as like any, like roadblocks or that you had to overcome or maneuver?
Yeah. Yeah. It's it being out of alignment. And I feel, it just circles back around to that chuckle a little because it's again, it's like, that's the work that I've realized I've been doing with others more than anything else, is that internal alignment, and then aligning the business as well. And so for me, I think that is so that's become so important to me because it was such a challenge for me, because I was trying to operate in a way that wasn't right for me. Because it's, again, the how-to information is everywhere, but it's the shallowest layer of mastery is how-to. It's, you need to understand what you're trying to accomplish. There's how, and then there's what. What are you trying to accomplish? The strategy. Mm-hmm. So we go tactics, and then there has to be strategy behind those tactics. Otherwise, you're going in circles. And then behind that is a why. What is the purpose behind it all? And then deeper than that, then, is the ability to shift your mindset and make new and powerful decisions. But at the deepest layer, the missing factor of most everything, because the deepest that I've seen is mindset work, out there for entrepreneurs. And honestly, even on mindset can set you up for failure. So I mean, I'd say that's one of the challenges I've faced. So trying to adopt a mindset that sounded like it would be right, sounded like it would be empowering, but was wrong for me, wrong for who I am. And so I was actually setting myself up for failure and burnout and frustration by trying to adopt the wrong tactics, the wrong strategy, an incomplete or unaligned why sense of purpose, right? And then a mindset that was out of alignment with who I am, because the missing factor is design, which is who are you at the root, understanding yourself. And when you understand yourself, your doing flows from your being rather than trying to do to prove to prove something or to be something. You simply are, and everything else can flow from that. So yeah, that's been the biggest challenge I faced, was just operating out of alignment with myself and just creating so much more frustration and pain than I needed and that played out in things like lead generation, sales, and a lot of other places.
Yeah, that's super fascinating, especially what you said there about the mindset factor, because I guess that, that next level up from when you do recognize a problem, a lot of the time it's like, oh, well, it's your mindset and you got to do something to change that. But, you just sort of hit the nail on the head there. If you're adopting the wrong mindset, that can be, just as damaging as not making an effort to do anything. So, your key was, again, the alignment factor. I suppose then, Peter, the real question is then, what do you do to, remain aligned? Because it's something that you need to be constantly, I guess, checking in on and making sure that you are aligned.
I would say, yeah, absolutely. I think that alignment is one of those things where it's who you are, right? So we're born as we're meant to be. And then through life, we're conditioned to not be, or to be the not version of ourselves, to be something different. And so we fall out of alignment. And it's just like going to the chiropractor. And I love, if you've been, I love the analogy, because when we go to the chiropractor, it's literally called an alignment.
Yeah.
Or an adjustment. Just got to get realigned, because when your spine is just out of alignment a little bit, can cause a lot of pain. And it comes back to not even knowing the opportunity you can be missing out on, because your whole nervous system flows through your spine. So that your cognitive function can be impaired by a minor misalignment, which means your energy is tapped that much. But if it's that much, that means you have that much less energy to put into your work, into your creative work. And it might make or break. It might be the difference that you need to go to that next level. So all that to, just give an analogy of like, once it's just like going to the chiropractor. Yeah, you need to stay in alignment. And just through just the environment we live in, I think it's on a cultural level, we've been conditioned to move out of alignment, because authenticity, being true to yourself, is not the norm. It's much more normal. There's much more pressure to be like some ideal person. That's why you have these guys that are trying to be like Gary Vee, because Gary Vee is a big name. And then you got other speakers that are like, well, I'll be a big famous speaker too. I'll just act like Gary Vee. So I'll wear a floppy hat and cuss a lot. And it's like, you're not Gary Vee. Gary Vee can pull it off because he's Gary Vee. Yeah. But you're not being you. So then you're never going to go anywhere, because you're a clone. We don't need more clones. We need more authentic people.
Yeah, and I guess sort of taking that case of Gary Vee, that in the pursuit of trying to be authentic, you're trying to mimic someone who is authentic. That's probably kind of where that's coming from. So, yeah.
And that's again back to that model I was talking about. That's because you can't just have a how to be authentic, because how to be authentic, there is no one size fits all. Wow. How to be authentic is to go all the way down to the deepest layer, which is to be yourself and understand yourself. And it comes down simply to something like an introvert is not going to sell and market the same way as an extrovert, right? You're not going to go into a crowded room and be super bubbly and extroverted if you're an introvert. And for me, I fall onto the extroverted scale, but I'm not a bubbly extrovert, not at all. So even for me, yes, I'm extroverted. Yes, I enjoy being around people, but I do not engage with a room like a gregarious, outgoing person, because I'm not outgoing, although I am extroverted. And it's an interest, there's a scientific distinction there. And that's part of the work that I do with clients, and is to take them through self-assessments, et cetera, across multiple different layers, from your psychological, it's kind of psychometrics of, personality, and even to the energetic level of just who are you? Because the more you understand who you are, the more you can act, what to align with, because it's not shooting in the dark. There is a unique and tangible bottom line you, right? And it's our job to discover that and be that.
Yeah, fantastic. And I wanted to ask you, Peter, what's like through your coaching experience, what I suppose what's the biggest highlight been for you? And I can probably guess it might have been since it's consistent with your vision, like the help that you've given to other people. But I won't put words in your mouth.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, just right away, yeah, it's just like just seeing just watching the alignment happen, even before I had that word to put behind it, right? Even before I understood what exactly was going on, it was always in my own heart that's what I knew I could help people with the most, was to be more themselves, to be more comfortable. My favorite quote, one of my favorite quotes, is "Make peace with yourself, and heaven and earth will make peace with you." And so the joy from me, the greatest joy, is to watch that in my clients as they make peace with themselves, and the bit in their work then flows, their success flows naturally to them, right? And I make the distinction, not easily, because there's always work to be done, but it does flow naturally. And that's the power of alignment, is that you are working with natural force. You're allowing things to come to you, because again, if you have, I believe that if you have a dream in your heart, you have a sense of purpose, a desire, you are uniquely equipped to realize that. That is your purpose. That is your calling. That is fulfillment. That is your passion, that which you are willing to suffer for. An entrepreneur means willing to bear the weight. You're willing to bear the weight. And in bearing the weight, in suffering for something that's so much greater, you find fulfillment. We all find fulfillment. And we do that the more we're in alignment with ourselves. So that's my greatest joy, is seeing that happen for my clients, and then seeing the more tangible results, you could say, of like the revenue gains and the business opportunities that land in their lap that were like, just recently a client had something that's been on his vision board for 2 years, and we did this alignment work, and now all of a sudden, synchronicity, right? It's just all of a sudden, hey, somebody comes up to him and says, I've got this opportunity that's perfect for what he's been looking for.
Yeah, wow. And I guess that's a case of like, and maybe, like, I'm sure this is probably a whole podcast episode, but I guess maybe those opportunities had always been there, but it just, like you said, he wasn't aligned and wasn't, I guess, seeing those opportunities come his way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When you're trying to push to make something happen, you're not allowing, and that comes right back to, that's a good way to just put what's been my biggest challenge: pushing, trying to make things happen. And then when I sit back and, and I say sit back, and it's that interesting, like, because I don't do any of this law of attraction, sit on the couch and visualize stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like, no,
It's
you
different.
go work.
Yeah.
But when the opportunity is there, that's what, you'll know within yourself, this is what I'm meant to do. And then the work kicks in, but it's aligned, which means it's fulfilling, and it's probably going to reward you as well financially, because those two, that goes hand in hand, I believe, with doing aligned work, is you will be provided for. It will provide you the income that you're looking for. But when you're trying to push and make that income, it just it comes back to that thing. Then it can create this circumstance where you're trying to get money out of somebody, not even consciously, but because of pushing, right? It can introduce something that you don't want into the dynamic,
Yeah, no, I love it. I think that's a good point, Peter, for us to transition into the film segment of this episode, and I'm really excited for this because before I reveal what the film is, I guess just for our listeners, this is the part of the program where we discuss a film of my guest choice, and one of my earlier guests had actually asked Jeremy, why the hell did he do this? And there's two reasons. One is, I'm a filmmaker myself, and I'm a big fan of cinema. But the reason I do it on the program is actually because it's more or less what I do a lot when I speak to people. I usually ask people what their favorite film is, and I do that because I think you can learn a lot about people's choice in films, and in fact the films they don't like as well. So, but in any case, the film we're going to be talking about today is Christopher Nolan's film Batman Begins, which obviously was the beginning of his Batman trilogy. And that's the film that Peter selected. And when he did select it, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to do this. This is so good. being a huge Batman fan. But I guess the reason I'm going to start, what I'm going to start with, I'm going to ask you, Peter, why did you choose this film? What does this film mean to you?
Yeah, it's been on my mind a lot. I mean that it the question of like favorite film, totally different discussion.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
this is one of them.
Yeah.
Though I mean I love the whole trilogy. I think it's just masterfully done. But it's been
Oh,
on my
yeah.
mind specifically just because there's a portion at the end that speaks to a lot of what I've been talking about just with sales, the whole idea of escalation. But I also love it because Batman is always striving against his own chaos, and the villains that arrive are just a reflection of his own internal conflict.
Yeah, those kind of manifestations of the struggle that he's having. And in fact, like I sort of prepared a couple of things we could talk about, but it's so like interesting that as we've been talking for the last whatever 40 minutes or so, um, how many similarities between the work that you do and your kind of perspective on things, how related it is to Batman. And I will I will say before going on, I hate to have to do this since this film was made more than 15 years ago. Like 17 years ago. I guess I'll have to say a spoiler alert, but if you haven't seen it yet, then there's something. Yeah. Stop listen. Yeah, stop listening to the Odyssey podcast because you're wasting time if you've not seen. Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah. Do you remember the first time you saw it, Peter? Like, is it I can't imagine. At least for me, it is anyway. It's a film I've seen quite a few times. But do you remember when you first saw it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Gives me chills just thinking of it because I loved that movie just from the very beginning, from the first time. I mean, it just riveted me. Because it's such a great portrayal of the epic, which I know is meaningful to you as a fan of the Odyssey, right? It's because story, something that I love because story is a place where we humans can find transformation. Because story is something where we find ourselves in the archetypal characters and the way that they play out. And so I just thought Christopher Nolan is a genius storyteller, and the way he used the figure of Batman and his conflict and his internal conflict and the way he had to grapple with the external conflicts to work on his own internal situation, and just watching that play out, the way he got himself put in prison. Yeah, it's just so good. So good.
Yeah, and and I think I've always seen like especially if we talk about the whole trilogy, it's for me at least like it is less of a Batman film and more of a Bruce Wayne film or films or trilogy. And I say that because you really, really do care about that character arc, especially when you look at it in the context of the whole trilogy. Because I know some people I spoke to feel let down with at least the final installation in The Dark Knight Rises, which baffles me. But I see it as that coming full circle with what things are set up in Batman Begins. But I guess one thing I will ask you, Peter, because it kind of relates to your work, is it's kind of that concept of the hero in that from that perspective of leadership. Like how do you see, because Bruce Wayne he takes this responsibility and obligation to save his city, and that's really at the heart of what Batman Begins is like. from your perspective, like, what do you see as that kind of calling, or you know, what's I guess that yearning to face that responsibility and those perhaps obligations, like from a hero's perspective, or the perspective of a leader.
Oh man. Yeah, no, I love that. That's such a good, that just yeah, just what came to mind right away is just again on the level of meta story, right? It's the facing the dragon, you know? He has to go face the dragon. What he finds is the dragon is himself.
Mm.
You know, what he finds is that he's constantly battling his own internal struggle, you know, to find himself. But it's also the other theme of that, like the hero's journey or the leader's journey, is to find a worthy challenge, to find a struggle and a challenge worthy of who you are. And there's a beauty to that too, that it's something greater that sets aside all sense of like, it's not an arrogance thing, right? It's not I think too much of myself. It's just a matter of being, again, just being present and recognizing this is a worthy challenge. My whole city is being overrun, right? That's a worthy challenge for Bruce Wayne. And then to see the challenge of, you know, the greater challenge is that as the trilogy goes on, is that he can't do it himself. And that's an interesting dynamic that plays out for him as being a bit of a loner, you know, and I resonate with that because I've had a lot of times where I'm just like, I'm going to go do this on my own, you know, but he needs the support of the city behind him. And that's what comes around full circle in The Dark Knight Rises, is that, yeah, he's the symbol of hope, but the city is what rises. The people rise, you know, because he gives them that figure. And of course, key moments of fighting certain villains that are needed, of course, but you know, there's something, it's the well, it's even played out in you have to be more than a man, you have to become a symbol. He starts with trying to be a symbol of fear to his enemies, but it carries through the whole arc of the story is that he becomes a symbol of hope to his people.
Yeah, big time. And just on that like authenticity kind of angle, because there's this kind of I guess challenge for Bruce Wayne, because you know, when he's you know, he's gone through his training and he's returned and he's on this mission now to save Gotham, and he's wearing a lot of masks. It's like, even when he's, you know, so-called Bruce Wayne, he's playing a role which was, you know, suggested by, you know, Alfred. He said, oh, you know, you got to make it look like you're this kind of like happy-go-lucky like playboy billionaire. Yeah, so there's that, and then also obviously, you know, the more you know, external one is obviously Batman. But like, I guess what's your perspective on that angle of being authentic? Because there is a level of authenticity even when you're I guess playing a role, right? Like, whether that be that Bruce Wayne one or Batman. Do you see that, I guess, that kind of dichotomy?
It's a really interesting one, because it's like you can't play a role that doesn't somehow reflect something about you. You know, to take on a role, having done a little acting myself, which I love, to, you know, it's interesting because you embody a character when you go to act. So he was, it's almost like you're being authentic in the moment of wearing the mask.
Yeah.
But is the mask who you are? To become confused that the mask is who you are, I think, is where the things fall apart. You know, so and that's where it becomes an inauthenticity factor, is to wear a mask that you're telling yourself is who you are. If you're lying to yourself with the mask, right, trying to basically deceive yourself in the mirror, then that's the major issue, as it were, because it's man, because there's that place where he needed to wear the mask as Batman to fulfill a role. But if he lied to himself and said that mask is who he is, that would consume him. And you kind of see that played out somewhat more in certain of the comics and the story, you know, the far off arcs of the comics. It's almost like, and certain other characters that do this, you know, have this duality to them of wearing a mask and fulfilling the role of a hero, and then that mask begins to kind of consume them. It's even to take a jump over to Star Wars, there's the Mask of Monin, which was the Sith created a mask that he infused himself into. So if anybody would fixate those who looked at it and they wanted to put it on, and as soon as they put it on, he would then control them through the mask. Right. So it's again, I love stories because they tell truths in a fictional way, and it's the mask then you become the mask. You're no longer you in that way, right?
You're losing yourself in that process.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think that is a big part of the struggle that he goes through in The Dark Knight, as he's faced with the Joker, because that's really a conflict of chaos and order. He's almost too much order, and because of that, it's like, who created the Joker? And that was part of what I wanted to get to with the discussion of Batman Begins too, because that's right at the end. That conversation with I feel like a fool.
Gordon. Yeah.
Gordon, thank you. Because I'm always like forgetting his name recently. But Gordon on the rooftop. And that's where he talks about, we start wearing armor. They start using bullet piercing rounds. Escalation. So it comes back to this sense of conflict in sales. You can't escalate. You're asking them to escalate. You go around wearing a cape and a mask. This guy leaves a calling card.
Yeah, so the force is going to be met with a reaction force, and it's this dynamic, and that totally does really tie in with the Dark Knight. Like what does it say? Like, I think Joker says, what happens when a immovable object meets an unstoppable force. So there's so many similarities here. We could go on. I would feel like we left something on the table if we didn't just briefly touch on, because obviously there's the new Batman film out starring Robert Pattinson. Have you seen that yet?
Not yet.
No, you haven't yet. Oh, gee.
So I guess I got to get off this. And
Peter, I can't. We should have. This call should have been booked, and I should have asked you beforehand and said, "Don't forget it. We could do this another time." No, but truly, it is really a fantastic film, and look, when you go see it, maybe we can invite you back on and can talk about that as well, because I know that's certainly something you'll enjoy. But look, we're coming to the end of the episode, and I've really enjoyed our chat today, Peter. But before we leave it at that, how can we find yourself and find out a bit more about your work and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Social media can be found at PL himself. So my initials there, PL, HIMSELF. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, on all of those. And then if my website is unshakable.pro, PRO, and that's also a good spot. Can never say exactly what's on there at the moment, but it's always a work in progress, and always a good place to find some connection with me as well. So
fantastic. And obviously we'll have those those relevant links in the description. But that being said, Peter, I really want to thank you for coming on. I've immensely enjoyed what we've spoken about today, and like just about every conversation I have on this podcast, I feel like we've only scratched the surface. So I hope we get another opportunity to speak again and dive a bit deeper into some of these topics. But Peter, thanks for coming on, and for our listeners, thank you. And for our listeners, look forward to tuning in for next week's episode. Until then, I'm Jeremy Mullally, host of the Odyssey Podcast. Thank you.